My aunt stood up at my cousin's engagement party and smiled at me across the table. "We've been covering your student loans," she said loud enough for 30 people to hear. $2,000 a month. Ever since your parents passed. I felt the room go quiet. Not the polite kind of quiet, the kind where everyone holds their breath, waiting to see what happens next. I said, "What are you talking about?" She tilted her head like I was being difficult. "Your loans, sweetheart. We've been paying them. All this time. I had been paying my own loans. Every month. Automatically withdrawn from my checking account at First National $847, the 15th of every month for 3 years without missing once. So where had $2,000 a month been going? My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I work as a pediatric nurse at a hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I drive a 2017 Honda Civic with a cracked passenger mirror I keep meaning to fix, and I eat lunch in the break room most days because the cafeteria food is actually decent and I don't have the energy to go anywhere. I am not dramatic. I am not someone who looks for problems. Most days, I just want to do my job, go home, feed my cat Chester, and watch something stupid on TV until I fall asleep. I tell you this because everything that happened, everything I'm about to tell you, came completely out of nowhere. And when it was over, I sat in my car in a parking garage for 45 minutes just staring at the concrete wall in front of me, trying to understand how I had lived inside a lie for 3 years without knowing it. My parents died when I was 27. Car accident on I-71 during an ice storm in January. They were coming back from visiting my mom's college roommate in Cincinnati. A truck drifted across the center line. They were gone before the ambulance arrived. I don't talk about it much. There isn't a lot to say that doesn't just hurt to say. What I will tell you is that when they died, I had $4,200 in my savings account, $38,000 in federal student loans, and a nursing degree I had finished 6 months before. I had just started my job at the hospital. I was 27 years old and I was figuring out how to be an adult, and then suddenly I also had to figure out how to be an orphan. My dad's sister, my Aunt Diane, stepped in immediately. She and her husband, my Uncle Greg, drove up from Louisville the day after the accident. They handled the funeral arrangements. They sat with me when I had to sign things I didn't fully understand. They told me I wasn't alone. "You're our family," Aunt Diane said. "We're going to take care of you." I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She was my father's sister. She had known me since I was born. She had shown up. What I didn't know, what I had no reason to question, was that my parents had a life insurance policy. $230,000, split evenly between the two of them, naming me as sole beneficiary. I was 27. I didn't know to ask about things like that. Aunt Diane handled the estate. She was named executor in my parents' will because she lived closest and my parents trusted her. She told me the estate had mostly debts. The mortgage, some credit card balances, my dad's truck payment. She said after everything was settled, there wasn't much left, but that she and Uncle Greg wanted to help me with my student loans. $2,000 a month, she said, as long as I needed it. I thanked her. I cried. I thought I was lucky to have family like that. I made my own loan payments anyway, because I believed in standing on my own feet, because my parents raised me to not be a burden, because $847 a month was hard but manageable on a nurse's salary, and I didn't want to be the kind of person who relied on other people's generosity without trying. When I mentioned this to Aunt Diane once, early on, she nodded and said, "Good girl, we're still sending it. Put it in savings." I assume she meant it as a gift, a cushion, something to build with. I never saw a dollar of it. I need to tell you about my cousin Becca, because you need to understand the full picture. Becca is Aunt Diane and Uncle Greg's daughter. She's 2 years younger than me, 29 at the time all of this came out. She and I were close growing up. Sleepovers, summer vacations at the lake. The kind of cousins who shared secrets and covered for each other when we were teenagers. Somewhere in our mid-20s that changed. I couldn't tell you exactly when or why. She got busier, or I did. She'd gotten into a relationship with a man named Tyler, who I found mildly insufferable, and they had a social life I wasn't part of. We texted occasionally. We saw each other at holidays. I was happy for her when she got engaged. Genuinely happy. She texted me a photo of the ring, princess cut. Her style exactly. And I sent back 3 heart emojis and a voice memo congratulating her. When she asked me to be a bridesmaid, I said yes without hesitating. The engagement party was at a venue in Louisville, a catering hall her future in laws rented, about 40 tables, open bar, the whole thing. I drove down after a Friday shift, changed in a gas station bathroom because I hadn't had time at home, and arrived 20 minutes late with my hair still damp. I was happy to be there. I want to be clear about that. I stood at that party and looked at my cousin and thought, good. This is good. We're going to be okay as a family. Then Aunt Diane stood up to give a toast. She talked about Becca growing up. She talked about Tyler. She said some things about love and commitment that were perfectly fine. And then, near the end, she looked at me across the room and said it. We are so blessed to have family who lets us show up for them. Like our Claire. A smile. A pause. We've been covering her student loans since she lost her parents. $2,000 a month. It's what family does. People turned to look at me. I saw pity on some faces, gratitude by proxy on others. My face felt like it had been dipped in cold water. That's not right, I said. I don't remember deciding to say it, it just came out. Aunt Diane tilted her head. Sweetheart, I've been paying my own loans the whole time. The room got very still. Uncle Reg cleared his throat. Claire, this isn't the place. Where has it been going? I asked. My voice was steady. I don't know how. If you've been sending $2,000 a month for 3 years, where has it been going? Because I've been paying First National myself. I have every statement. Aunt Diane looked at me with an expression I still think about. Not guilt. Exactly. Something more calculating than that. Like she was deciding what shape to make the next lie. You must be confused, honey, she said. You were under so much stress. I have the bank statements, I said again. On my phone. Right now. I didn't, actually. But I knew they existed. And I knew what they would show. I left the party 40 minutes later. I drove to a Cracker Barrel 3 miles away, ordered coffee and a piece of pie I didn't eat, and sat in a booth for 2 hours with my laptop and my phone and started pulling everything together. My loan servicer's website, every payment history going back to the beginning. Every transaction, my account, my routing number, my money. $847 a month, every 15th, never missed. Then I called the insurance company. I had found a folder in my email, buried, from 3 years ago, right after my parents died, with a policy number on a document Aunt Diane had forwarded me to sign. I had signed it and sent it back without fully reading it because I was grieving, and she said it was just estate paperwork. I called the number on the document at 9 in the morning the following Monday. I gave my name. I gave my social security number. I gave the policy number. The woman on the phone was very kind and very professional. She told me the policy had paid out $230,000 11 weeks after my parents' death. She told me it had been paid to the estate. She told me my aunt, as executor, had received and signed for the disbursement. I said, "Can you tell me what account it was deposited into?" She couldn't give me that information directly, but she gave me what I needed to take to an attorney, which was the confirmation that the payout had happened, the amount, the date, and the fact that I was the named beneficiary of the estate. I had a consultation with a probate attorney in Columbus 4 days after the party. I sat across from a woman named Sandra who had short gray hair and reading glasses. She kept pushing up her nose, and I laid out everything I had in a manila folder. She read through it quietly. Then she looked up at me and said, "Has your aunt ever provided you with a formal accounting of the estate?" I said I didn't know what that meant. She explained. As executor, Aunt Diane was legally required to account for all estate assets, debts, and distributions, to provide documentation, to show where everything went. In Ohio, beneficiaries have the right to that accounting. Did she ever give you anything like that? Sandra asked. She gave me a piece of paper that said the estate had about $12,000 left after debts, I said. I didn't question it. Sandra took her glasses off entirely. Claire, she said, I think you should let me request that accounting. It took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of not saying anything to Aunt Diane or Uncle Greg. 6 weeks of texting Becca normal things about bridesmaid dress colors while knowing what I knew and not knowing yet how bad it was. 6 weeks of going to work, doing my job, taking care of kids who needed me, coming home, feeding Chester, lying awake at 1 a.m., running numbers in my head. The accounting came back with gaps you could drive a truck through. The insurance payout, $240,000, had gone into the estate account. From there, Sandra traced it through 3 years of withdrawals. The mortgage on my parents' house was paid off. Fine. Their debts were settled. Fine. There was a line item for funeral expenses, $14,000, which matched what I remembered. What didn't match was the $187 that moved out of the estate account over the following 18 months in transactions labeled things like estate maintenance, property management, and my personal favorite, beneficiary support. The property had been sold 14 months after my parents died. I knew that. Aunt Diane had told me the house sold for $210,000 and that after the mortgage payoff and real estate fees, there was barely anything left. The house had actually sold for $347,000. I found this out from county property records, which are public. Sandra showed me how to look it up. I sat in her office with a printout of the sale in my hands and felt something shift behind my sternum. Not quite anger yet. Something more like the feeling of stepping off a curb you didn't see. The question, Sandra said carefully, is where the difference went. We knew where it went. We just needed to be able to prove it. Uncle Greg had a boat. I had always thought it seemed like a lot of boat for someone who casually mentioned living on a budget. A 24-foot Payliner boat we eventually confirmed 8 months after my parents died. Cash purchase. $41,000. Becca had a new car. A white Lexus she'd gotten as a gift from her parents the Christmas after everything happened. I remembered thinking that was generous. I didn't do the math on where generous came from. There were 2 vacations, Cancun, then Ireland, that Aunt Diane had posted about on Facebook. I'd liked the photos. I'd written looks amazing under a picture of her standing on the cliffs of Moha. I scrolled back through those posts in bed at midnight and stared at them for a long time. Sandra sent a formal demand letter on a Tuesday in March. She had documented enough by that point: the insurance payout, the property sale discrepancy, the estate accounting gaps, to make a very clear case that Aunt Diane had breached her fiduciary duty as executor. In plain language, she had stolen from the estate. From me, the letter asked for full accounting, repayment of all misappropriated funds, and gave them 30 days to respond before we filed a formal petition with the probate court. Aunt Diane called me the same day the letter arrived. I didn't answer. She called 3 more times. Then Uncle Greg called. Then I got a text from Becca that said, Claire, what is going on? My mom is really upset. Can you please call her? I stared at that text for a long time. I thought about all the times I had been upset and nobody had called. The night after the accident, when I sat on the floor of my apartment and didn't eat anything. The first Thanksgiving alone. The birthday that came and went, and I worked a double shift because it was easier than being home. I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and went to bed. Aunt Diane hired an attorney. Of course she did. The attorney sent back a letter arguing that the estate had been managed appropriately, that the property sale proceeds had been used for estate expenses, and that any funds directed toward my benefit had been handled informally, in good faith. Sandra read me the letter over the phone. That's a legal way of saying she spent it, and she's hoping you don't have receipts, she said. We had better than receipts. We had county records. We had the insurance company's payout documentation. We had 3 years of my own loan statements proving I had never received a penny toward my loans despite her claim at the party. We had the boat registration. We had the car title. We had the property sale price on public record. We filed the petition. The mediation hearing was on a Wednesday morning. I wore the blazer I keep for job interviews. I sat across a table from Aunt Diane and Uncle Greg for the first time since the engagement party, and I looked at them. Aunt Diane looked the way she always looked. Composed, put together, hair done. She met my eyes, and I watched her do the thing she always did, the slight softening of her expression, the tilt of her head that meant she was about to say something that sounded gentle but wasn't. Claire, she said, I hope you know how much we love you. I said, I know what you did. Her attorney spoke. My attorney spoke. Numbers moved across the table in documents. Sandra had calculated the total, the insurance payout minus legitimate estate expenses, plus the property sale shortfall, minus what I had independently paid toward my own loans for 3 years. The figure was $194,000. Aunt Diane's attorney tried to negotiate it down, called it a misunderstanding, called it a matter of interpretation, called it at one point a family matter that could be resolved privately. Sandra said in the flattest voice I'd ever heard from another person, your client used her position as executor to redirect nearly $200,000 in assets belonging to her niece. We have documentation for all of it. We are not here to negotiate the facts. They settled. I'm not going to tell you the exact number because Sandra advised me not to, and because it honestly doesn't matter. What matters is that it was enough. Enough that the boat is gone. Enough that the things changed for them in ways that are real and lasting. Enough that when I got the first payment, I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot and called my best friend Rachel and said, I need to tell you something. And she listened for 45 minutes without saying a word. Becca reached out 2 months after the settlement. She sent a long message. She said she hadn't known. She said she found out when their parents' attorney told them what had been in the demand letter, and that she had confronted her mother, and that her mother had cried and said it was complicated, and she'd always meant to make it right. Becca said she was sorry. She said she understood if I needed space. I read the message several times. I believe that Becca didn't know. I think that's true. I've turned it over enough times to feel reasonably confident she wasn't part of it. But I also thought about standing at that engagement party with damp hair, genuinely happy to be there, genuinely glad for her. And I thought about how her Lexus was bought with money that should have been mine. And I thought about how complicated it is to separate a person from the circumstances that shaped them, especially when those circumstances were funded by someone else's loss. I haven't responded yet. I'm not sure I will. I'm not sure what I'd say. What I know now that I didn't know then, if someone dies and leaves you as a beneficiary, you have the right to request a formal accounting of the estate. You are allowed to ask questions. You are allowed to hire your own attorney separate from the executor to represent your interests. You are allowed to not simply trust, even when the person asking for your trust is someone who has known you your whole life, someone who showed up when you needed them, someone who said all the right things. Grief makes you vulnerable in ways that are hard to explain to someone who hasn't been in it. You are not thinking about insurance payouts and executor accountability. You are thinking about how to get through the next hour. You are thinking about the fact that your parents are gone and nothing about the world makes sense anymore. I wish someone had told me earlier to ask more questions. I wish I had known enough to know what questions to ask. I am not angry at 27-year-old me for not knowing. She was doing the best she could. What I am is clear now. Clear in a way I haven't felt in a long time. My loans are paid off. I have savings. I go to work and I take care of my patients, and I drive my Honda with the cracked mirror, and sometimes I eat dinner alone and I miss my parents and I let myself miss them instead of keeping busy to avoid it. Chester is asleep on my feet as I write this. It is raining outside. I have a full day tomorrow and I'm going to sleep well tonight. They took 3 years from me. The grief was mine and they couldn't touch that. But everything else, the safety net, the start, the cushion that should have been there, they took. I took it back, not just the money, the part of myself that knew something was wrong before I had any proof. The part that stood up in a catering hall in Louisville with damp hair and said, clearly and out loud, that's not right. She was right. She was right the whole time. And I'll never apologize for being the one who said so. I've thought a lot about why it took me 3 years to find out. Part of it was grief. When you lose both parents at once, your brain goes into a kind of survival mode where you stop questioning things that feel stable. Aunt Diane felt stable. She showed up. She said the right words. And I needed something to hold on to badly enough that I didn't look closely at what I was actually holding. But the other part, the part I've had to sit with honestly, is that I was raised to be grateful and not ask too many questions, to not seem ungrateful, to not rock the boat with family. I think a lot of people, especially women, are raised that way. You accept what you're told because questioning it feels like accusing someone, and accusing family feels disloyal, and disloyalty feels like losing them too. That conditioning almost cost me everything. What I know now is that trust and verification are not opposites. You can love someone and still ask to see the paperwork. You can be grateful and still understand your own rights. Aunt Diane counted on the fact that I wouldn't ask, that I'd be too sad, too polite, too afraid of seeming difficult. She was right about me for 3 years. She stopped being right the moment she stood up at that party and said it out loud in front of 30 people. There's something about being exposed publicly that clarifies things fast. I didn't go looking for a fight. The fight found me in a catering hall in Louisville with damp hair and a full shift behind me, and something in me just didn't fold. I don't fully know where that came from. Maybe from watching my parents work hard their whole lives and never complain. Maybe from 3 years of paying my own bills on a nurse's salary and knowing bone deep what the numbers actually were. Sandra told me once toward the end of everything that the clients who struggle most in cases like mine aren't the ones without evidence. They're the ones who talk themselves out of believing what the evidence shows. They keep finding explanations. They keep giving the benefit of the doubt. They keep choosing the version of events when nobody they loved did something unforgivable. I understood that completely. I had done it too for a while. What finally helped me was just looking at the numbers and deciding to believe them over the story. The numbers didn't have a relationship with me. The numbers didn't cry or explain or say they'd always meant to make it right. The numbers just sat there being true. Choices have weight. Every decision Aunt Diane made to take the money, to keep taking it, to spend it on vacations and a boat while I worked nights and paid my own loans. Those choices accumulated into something she couldn't talk her way out of once the documentation existed. She built 3 years of consequences, one transaction at a time, and the math eventually caught up. And my choices accumulated too. Every month I paid that bill myself. Every shift I showed up for. Every time I didn't ask for help I didn't need because I was standing on my own 2 feet. That added up to something also. It added up to a person who knew her own numbers, who had her own records, who stood up in a room full of people and said, "That's not right," and meant it. I'm not who I was before my parents died. I don't think you ever fully come back from something like that. But I'm someone who knows what she's owed and knows how to go get it and knows that asking questions is not the same as being difficult. That's worth more than $194,000. Though I'll take both.